Holy shit. So this is a super exciting video because not only is this the first ever Elegoo video on this channel that Elegoo actually sent me a machine to test and review, but the machine they sent is an early release of the all-new Centauri Carbon Core XY 3D printer they announced about 8 months ago. I'd like to start out by thanking Peter from Elegoo for this Centauri Carbon and for the opportunity to be one of the first YouTubers to actually get their hands on one of these things to put it through its paces and let you know my thoughts on it. The Centauri Carbon is Elegoo's first foray into the Core XY prosumer 3D printer market. It offers a 256 cubic millimeter build volume with a dual-sided textured PEI sheet, one side for general purpose printing and the other for better lower temperature adhesion of PLA. Printing speeds of 500 millimeters per second with printing temperatures of 300 degrees Celsius at the nozzle and 110 degrees Celsius on the bed. It has a built-in auxiliary part blower, an active exhaust fan with nano-mineral crystal filter, and an onboard camera with print failure detection. And the only thing I've got left to say about this machine is I can't wait to see it. So the first thing I see when I open the box up is that it is completely encased in foam. There's a little piece that goes on the top, and this looks like, yep. So the door is not attached to the machine. That has to get installed after you unbox it. It's got a nice pull handle already installed on it. And then we take this top piece off here. And it seems like we have the machine all packed in foam. So I don't know if there's an easy way to get this out of the box, but I guess we'll find out the hard way. So the first thing I'm noticing about the Centauri Carbon is that the build quality looks like it's excellent. I haven't taken any of the foam out of it yet, but just looking on the outside, the aesthetic is very nice. It's got a magnetic door, and the door is actually already installed. The other thing is a lid. It's a top cover that goes up here to enclose the machine completely. So for now, I'll leave that off because most of the foam looks like it comes out from the top. If I open the door up, I've got this big block of cardboard, which I'm assuming houses all of the accoutrements. Let me see if I can get this foam out. Yeah, it's got some weight to it. So inside the big box, there is the Centauri Carbon user manual, quick start setup guide, how to take all the foam out, how to unlock the heated bed because it comes with a security lock to keep it from moving. On the back, there's instructions on how to install a touchscreen and then how to go through the self-check. Inside the accessory bag is the usual suspects. We've got some sample filament, Allen key set, some screwdrivers, nozzle cleaner, some grease for the linear rails because it's got bearing-loaded linear rails inside of it, a glue stick, USB stick, and a nozzle cleaner that I'm assuming gets installed somewhere inside the machine. Got the IEC cable, the spool mount that actually is mounted on the side of this machine, which is already a major plus for me because the rear-mounted spool holders just don't cut it for my applications. I don't like having to spin the machine around to get to the filament, so having it on the side is already a nice touch. And then we have the Elegoo touchscreen, which actually just clips on. There's no screws that hold it in place, so that should be an easy assembly. So it's got 3 screws for the Z-axis and 3 linear rails. I'm not sure if this does automatic bed tilt compensation just yet. I see 1 Z motor. I don't see the other 2. If there are additional Z motors, they may be underneath the machine. But if it has the 3-point and it's got the auto tilt compensation, this will actually move the table to square it up with the nozzle. It's using the reddish hue high performance belts, and there's a zip tie that holds some cardboard onto the nozzle, so I'll snip that, pull that off. Then there's another piece of foam inside of here, which this appears to be a little filament poop chute, if you will. And then just like that little silicone pad that was inside the bag, right here, there's a little filament wiper. So that's just a replacement for the one that comes pre-installed. So the filament tube and the wiring for the electronics comes from the factory inside of a drag chain, which is really nice. And the hot end actually has some magnet mounts to hold the front cover on to make maintenance a little bit easier. That's a nice touch. It's similar to the Infamec TX that I did a review on, but that did not come with a cable chain, and it did not come with what appears to be an exhaust fan with maybe a carbon filter. I haven't read through the instructions yet to see exactly what, but this machine looks like it comes pre-installed with a filter system already. The build surface is a textured PEI, and it's labeled side A, and then on the other side, side B. And on side B, this says that it is PLA specific with an adhesion of 5 stars. So they have a side A and a side B. Side B is a smoother texture, and then side A is the more crackly texture that we've come to find in all these 3D printers. So I'm interested in seeing the difference in performance between the two build sides. And as I mentioned, there are 3 screws that secure the bed in place for shipment. So I have to remove those screws, and I will put on the screen right now. So take off this tape here. Another nice touch is that they actually put the ribbon cable inside of a plastic bag. They don't put the tape directly on the ribbon cable, because if they did that, you could potentially damage the ribbon. Tape does leave a little bit of residue, but a couple little touches with the piece of tape, and there we go. The screen's actually got a little notification on it that says connect to the internet and update the firmware before use. Scary. So let's put this on. So we just snap the ribbon cable into place, which is a little trickier to do if you don't really have great eyesight. And then once it's on, let's line up the 3 little tabs on the back of the screen, slide down, and it locks it in place. So I started looking through the manual. It turns out that this machine already has a pre-installed air filter and a camera. So right over here, there's a little camera that'll stream your prints for you. So that's a real nice touch that it comes with the filter and the camera already installed. So that's pretty awesome, actually. And yep, there is a poop chute on the back. Then inside the manual, there's a QR code to access the tutorials. There are some instructions on how to get the machine set up, but we've already gone through that already. Okay, so initial setup, choose our language, hit confirm, and then it says use a hex key to remove the 3 screws shown in the image, but we've already done that. So the initial setup does take about 45 minutes or so. I'm not going to say that I sat around and timed it, but it did seem like it took quite a while to do everything. It goes through auto level, input shaper tests, and whatnot. But once it comes up, it says all tests have been complete, and then you get this screen right here, which is basically the home screen. And then on the left-hand side, you've got the little list of different options. So you've got home screen, files for printing. So there's a local memory, there's USB drive, and then there's a print history. And then inside of this menu, we've got the prepare screen, which has all of our axis movements, homing buttons, motor off, and then our extruder temperature, bed temperature, chamber temperature. It's not a heated chamber, but it'll tell you what the inside temperature of the chamber is. And then there's a button on the bottom, which lets us choose different modes. There's a silent mode, balance mode, sport mode, and ludicrous mode. I'm sure it probably changes acceleration rates and different fan settings or whatever inside of the programs, depending on what the slicer spits out. And then we've got the extruder, so we can extrude or retract filament. There's a fan page that has all of the different fans that we have on the machine. There's the model fan, which you can hear there. There's the auxiliary fan, and that's the auxiliary fan in ludicrous mode. normal mode, and silent mode. And then the case fan, and that's for the exhaust with the active charcoal filter. And then under the extruder, it says adjust the print temperature based on materials recommendation settings during loading. And then here you can choose the nozzle temperature, and then you can choose to load or unload filament from here. So that's nice. I like that you can change the temperature of your load and unload on the fly. On the settings page, we've got screen brightness, screen off. So there's a timer for when the screen turns off. You can have it 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or always on. Language selection, Z offset adjustment, log export, time zone settings, build plate options. Again, there's an A side and a B side. You can check for updates if we're on Wi-Fi network. We can do is restore factory settings, power loss recovery, and filament detector. So we could turn those on and off over here under settings. The network tab lets us choose our Wi-Fi network, so we could log in there. The device info shows us all of the pertinent information, serial number, total printing time, the manufacturer of the printer, contact, and then the device type. Then under the camera page, we can turn on time-lapse photography, or we can set it up for video. I haven't set any of this up yet, so I'm not quite sure exactly what any of that is going to entail. But the first thing I want to do is I want to get it onto the network because it said on the screen to update the firmware. So I'm going to get it on the network. I'm going to do a check for system updates, and I'll see what happens. So once it goes through all the setup stages, then it's just a matter of going to the gear, choosing network, picking your network, and putting in your Wi-Fi password. And then after that, it should just connect and everything will be hunky-dory. And then in the setup menu, what you'll want to do is scroll down to where it says check for updates. And right now it's running version 1.1.4 because they just pushed a new firmware update recently. And when I powered it up today to film, because it's a few days later, the machine actually connected to the internet. It did an automatic check for an update, and it prompted me to update the firmware to this version 1.1.4. Prior, it was running 1.1.0, which I guess is the initial release of the firmware. When you choose the home screen, you've got the option for work light, setting your nozzle and bed temperature. It shows you that you have Wi-Fi connectivity with the little Wi-Fi icon, but pressing it doesn't really do anything, doesn't take you to any menus. If you press the fan button, it brings you to the fan menu where you can turn on the auxiliary fan, model fan, or the case fan. And they're all separate output, so you can command each one individually. You can hear some cooling fans running when it sits at idle with the door closed. It's a little more quiet, but you can still hear a little bit of a droning whine, if you will, as it's just sitting idle. So as I mentioned earlier, they give you a little baggie of accoutrements, and they give you the dreaded glue stick, which I do not use glue stick. Anybody who knows me long enough, they know that I am not a proponent of the glue. In my opinion, if you have to use glue, you have inherent issues with your printer that you must address rather than put a band-aid on it, but that's just me. So inside the box, they supply you with a USB stick. I'm sure there are some sample prints on here that I can try out, and they do give you a small bit of Elegoo Rapid PLA, which is a high-speed PLA for high-speed printers. But I have a bunch of G-Tech high-speed PLA that I promised that I would do some content with, so I'm going to use that instead. But for right now, I'm going to plug in the USB stick, which is going to find its way onto my keyring eventually because mine is kind of dying. But yeah, I will plug in the USB stick that came with it. And there's 3 ways you can plug it in. There's the wrong way, and then the right way. From there, I'll just go to the folder, USB drive, and then here we could see that there is part model, Centauri Carbon, software, and user manual. So under the Centauri Carbon, there's nothing in there. 3D model, we've got a couple of different folders. So there's a vase, a Buddha, a scraper, the Eiffel Tower, the boat, and the CC Mini. I don't know what that is. CC Mini looks like a small representation of the Centauri Carbon as a 3D print little fun part. Now, I'm not sure if you guys are keeping up with the drama that's going on with the boat right now, but there seems to be some licensing issues. The new owner of the IP for the boat is a little perturbed that people are deriving our artwork, blah, 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 you know, whatever. So it's political crap. But anyway, it says right here that their take on the boat is going to take 15 minutes and 29 seconds. There's not really much in here that I would want to print to do a test, but I guess I can do that. There's the Buddha, the quintessential Elegoo, not really benchmark, but first print. It says that the Buddha is going to take 24 minutes. The vase says it'll take 4 hours and 10 minutes, and ain't nobody got time for that. The scraper, 1 hour, 9 minutes. Eiffel Tower, 2 hours. And the mini Centauri Carbon is 2 hours and 9 minutes. I guess I'm locked into the boat right now. So the filament that I'll be using for this test is going to be this G-Tech high-speed PLA in this snazzy, I don't know what you would call it. It's supposed to be green. It is green, but I'm not sure what kind of green that is. Like a, I don't know, like a green grass, or it's not quite lime green. It's not as bright, but it's got a nice, I don't know, it's got a nice color to it. Let me know in the comments what you think the color of green should be called. How about emerald? I think we can go with emerald. I don't know. Let me know. Now, going back to what I said earlier, the filament spool actually sits on the right-hand side of the machine, and the filament sensor is right on the right-hand side as well. I don't have to worry about spinning the entire thing around. And let's see how the sensor takes to loading filament. Oh, see, it goes right in. So +1 on the Centauri Carbon because the filament sensor path is nice and open. It goes right in. It didn't seem to jam up or anything like that. And we just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until we get pay dirt. Okay, now I have not run this machine yet. This is going to be real time as I go. This is what is going to be happening. I usually leave the cover on, and that is a point of contention. A lot of people have really complained to me that, oh, you should take the top cover off if you're printing PLA, blah, 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 whatever. I bucked the system a little bit, hence the name for the YouTube channel. But anyway, so I'm going to try to do home. I don't know, I got to go to setting, extruder, nozzle temp, and then I could do a load. Let's try that. So we'll go, I don't know, 220, and then hit load. Okay, so it goes over to poop chute, heats the nozzle up, and it goes through a multi-step process right here. Hot end seems to be heating up at a pretty good rate. Okay, so we're at 220 degrees. It's doing a load filament command. I can feel it pulling on the filament, so that's good. So when it does the filament load procedure, it spits it out into the little poop chute that's in the back there, and then you hear "Kuk-kuk-kuk-kuk." I thought the nozzle was hitting the actual chute, but there's a little flap that it controls when it moves the head back. So it opens this little flapper up, and then when it goes away from it and rubs on the silicone pad, it kind of goes tuk-tuk-tuk. But we can see that they even left me some residual poop from their test prints. So I've got a couple little blobs of green, and we're ready to go. So I'll hit complete to verify that the filament is loaded. Go back to files, USB drive, model, boat. Go here. Okay, so it's prompting us for which build plate we want to use, side A or side B. If we want to select time-lapse photography to do a time-lapse, and if we want to do a preliminary bed level. We did the bed level already, so it should be okay. So I will choose side A, time-lapse photography, and then I'm just going to hit print. Okay, so it took 15 minutes and 7 seconds, and it prompts you whether you want to cancel or if you want to print again. So if you remove the part, you can hit print again and you can print it again. So let's see how it sticks to the plate. I didn't use the recommended side because side B is the recommended side. See on the bottom, it's kind of missing the text there that's supposed to be at the bottom. Overall print quality is pretty okay. I'm on a big wobbly table, so that could be the reason for some of the ringing here. A lot of stringing. That could just be filament. I have not used this filament before. I can run the same test with a more common filament or one that I use more often. Overall, everything looks okay. The overhang here isn't bad. A little bit of sagging. I wouldn't call this the best of the worst, but it's not bad. Quite honestly, the best boat that I've printed was this guy right here. And this came out of the Infamec TX. And I'm not going to do any kind of comparison between these two models just yet, but if you'd like to see me do a comprehensive side-by-side comparison between the Elegoo Centauri Carbon and the Infamec TX, just drop a comment down below. Because I mean, hell, I got to do something to bump my engagement. Now I'm going to install Elegoo Slicer on my computer because at the moment it seems like this is a closed ecosystem between the Elegoo Slicer and the Centauri Carbon. But I was informed that Elegoo is talking with the team of developers that work on Orca Slicer, and there's going to be profiles and communication protocols set up in the future. So we're not limited to just using a closed ecosystem with the Elegoo Slicer with the Centauri Carbon. So let me get that software installed and I'll see you over on the computer. So when we initially fire up the Elegoo Slicer, we could see that in this little about window here that it's based on Orca Slicer. And when we go into all of the different menus, such as the prepare menu and the preview menu, we can see that this is nothing more than a reskinned direct copy of Orca Slicer, but it's got the additional information that is required to connect the slicer to the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. To connect to it, it's just a simple matter of clicking on the Wi-Fi icon right here, putting in the IP address, hitting test, and making sure that we have the host type set to Elegoo link, which is different than the Octoprint link. So if I did that and I did a test, you can see that it'll not connect. But if I go back to the Elegoo link and hit test, it works fine. That to me kind of raises a little point of contention because that means that we're kind of stuck using this until, as I mentioned earlier, Elegoo is going to get with the Orca team and they're going to divulge their protocol. So hopefully in the near future we can have the Centauri Carbon running directly off of plain vanilla Orca Slicer and not have to worry about any special slicers. I've already gone and set up the connection for the device. So if I click on device, you can see right here that I have the link to the Centauri Carbon. I have the machine turned on, so if I hit play, I can see the camera right here. Now the camera is a little on the dark side, and I don't know of any way to adjust that because, again, this is a pretty closed system. I have tried to SSH into the device, and it does not like it. It doesn't want me to SSH into it at all. From the device page, I should be able to control the machine. I'm just doing a home all right now. And you can see that the update on the camera is pretty good. It's nice and smooth. It's actually fairly responsive. The only thing that I'm not too keen on is that when I turn the light on, it doesn't really change much. It doesn't get that much brighter. The lighting that's inside the machine is not really the greatest. It does leave something to be desired. And the interface is very minimal. So there's no real way to look at things such as the bed mesh or anything like that. It's all basically on this one page. So if you're used to using mainsail or fluid, you're kind of beat for any of the enhanced functionality that you would get from either of those interfaces. When you first install the software, it's going to come up with this printer selection window right here, and it's going to ask you what type of machine you've got. So you can see that there's a fair amount of Elegoo printers. There's the Centauri Carbon, there's the Elegoo Centauri, which I'm guessing is nothing more than a stripped down version of the Centauri Carbon, because you can see right here it doesn't have any side panels or front door. There's profiles for the Orange Storm Giga, There are profiles for the Neptune 4 series of machines, the Neptune 3 Pro series of machines, the Neptune 3, the Neptune X, the 2 series, and also the old school OG Elegoo Neptune. And they're all available in different nozzle sizes as well. So there's a lot of different profiles that you can use as long as you have an Elegoo printer. And then if we scroll down, we've got custom printers. So we've got custom clipper printers, Marlin printers, generic RRF printers, printers with tool changers. There's some anchor machines, some Anycubic machines. There's artillery machines. So I can actually grab a profile for the Sidewinder X3 Plus and the X4 Plus from here. There's Bambu Lab. There's really a whole bunch of different profiles that are basically all the ones that would be available in the Orca Slicer. So the only major difference aside from the color scheme is more than likely that Elegoo protocol that they're using for the Wi-Fi networking. So I'm just going to, oh, here we go, Flying Bear S1. So I've got a profile for even the Infomec TX I could use. And if I scroll down a little further, okay, there it is right there. Infomec TX and Infomec TX with the hardened steel nozzle. So all of my printers are available in this version of Orca Slicer. So until Elegoo and Orca play nice, I could actually use this slicer as my default slicer of choice. So I've opened up this model that has a bunch of these business card holders that I modeled up. I'm going to reduce the number of instances that I have. I'm going to print out one just to see. So we go to objects. I'm just going to grab these guys here and just delete and change the printer model to the Centauri Carbon. I've got a Rapid PLA Plus profile. There's only a handful of profiles, and most of the filament profiles are Elegoo. But I'm going to use this Rapid PLA Plus profile because I'm using the high-speed PLA from G-Tech. And from here, I'm going to just leave all of the default settings just to see how well this is going to work. I will do a slice plate. It gives me my time. It says 24 minutes time. And then I will just go to print, hit print. And I'm just going to upload for right now. It uploaded it to the Centauri Carbon. Click on the device tab, and we can see right here, business card holder. I'll hit play here to make sure that the camera's on. Not sure why it turned off. It may time out after a while. Choose this, start print. I'm going to use the textured side A because I like to buck the system a little bit. I will turn off the bed leveling. I'll turn on the time lapse. And then I will hit send. Then hopefully in 22 minutes, I will have a new business card holder. So the printing result is pretty good. There's some camel toe on the bottom here that I'm not quite fond of. And there was some stringing on the inside of here. You can kind of see the little wisps of string. There's some string here. I'm going to blame the filament because I've never printed with this filament before. Because, I mean, let's face it, it's typically a filament issue or a setting issue in the slicer. So let me try one more thing and we'll see what happens with that. Oh, and sorry about not turning on the light until about halfway through the time lapse. I kind of forgot to do that. But let me print one more thing and we'll come back and see how that looks. Okay, so first look, it's pretty good. It's kind of hard to tell with this particular part because there's no interruptions. There are some wispy strings here, a little bit there, but otherwise it's a nice looking print. It's pretty good quality. I am digging this green. I'll try a couple more things and see how they come out, but for right now, that seems to be pretty good. I think I'm going to try the old fallback now and go with the red Kinluat with the Voron cube just to see, because it's pretty much my quintessential print. So let me try that and see how that turns out, because I'm a little iffy about this filament, especially I was looking at a little bit more with the boat. There's the seam right here. I'm not too thrilled about that seam. And from what I've seen with the Elegoo interface, there's no access to any of the would-be, if this were a Clipper system, which I'm not sure of as of yet, but if this were a Clipper system, I would have access to pressure advanced settings, things like that, and this doesn't seem to have that. Now before I start the print, I went and grabbed one of those extra UPI light bars that I had and plugged it into the front USB, and that gives me enough power to light that thing up. And I mean, it looks great from the standpoint of the machine really lacks lighting, and that helps out. But the issue that I've run into is that the camera's auto exposure kind of corrects itself in the wrong direction, because now the lighting is too bright for the camera and it goes dim on it again. So I'll try it with this light bar just to see if it helps out with the time lapse, but I'm hoping that prior to the release of this thing, they kind of address the exposure issue with the camera. So let's send a print over and see how it does. So looking at the cube, it's actually very good. It's got the usual, well, not as many of them, but it's got the usual striations of this filament. But the bridging underneath is really good. The seam is on the inside of the cube. I'm just going with the default settings. I didn't really change anything. So the seam is on the inside of this hole right here. And it's hard to see. If I could zoom in with the lens, I guess. I'm not really digging the size of the seam, and I'm not sure if there's a way to tune that out. But other than that, the cube itself looks pretty perfect. Now I set this to print from the slicer, and I wasn't paying attention, and it went through a full bed level, but with that, I think it eliminated the camel toeing that I was getting, so that's a good thing. First layer is, I mean, just about perfect. So I'm pretty happy with that. We'll see shortly how you'll see before me how the time lapse came out. And if I'm going to be really critical, I could see right here, I could see some ringing in the X. I could actually see the X repeated a number of times. The Y not as much, which is strange because the table usually rocks front to back. So I'm not sure if that's caused by directional change, causing it to ghost in X, or what. But it's a pretty good print. And it said on the slicer it was going to take 19 minutes, and the screen says that it took 19 minutes, so that's pretty on par. Top print surface is very smooth, so I'm pretty happy. So I printed out this Flexi Rexy because the last one that I printed out I kind of got a kick out of. I don't know, I like the way they feel under the hand. Maybe there's a reason for that. But print quality is very good. Could barely even see the layers. It's smooth. The build surface, I haven't used the B side yet. I've been having really good results with the A side, so I'm sticking with that so far. When I sliced it, I didn't double check to see if it was totally on the build plate, so it kind of left a little booger by the tail. But aside from that, I'm pretty happy with Flexi Rexy. But if you spend any amount of time here, you know that I'm not really one for printing the big trash cans and things like that. It's really not my thing. I don't have a need for any of that stuff kicking around the house. And I really don't want to waste plastic and pollute the environment and all that stuff. So I'm not really big on the toy, cartoony kind of prints. I print more of things that I need rather than just random items. So I'm not going to get too deep into that type of stuff. If you want to see that type of stuff, I mean, go check out Uncle Jesse's channel. I'm sure he'll be putting up a video on this machine around the same time I upload mine. So check that out there. But what I do want to do is I want to flip this machine over and kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it underneath and see what's what down there. And then I can give you my general feedback and takeaways and let you make your own decision. So I've got the bottom open, and the first thing I'm noticing is that it is a single Z drive. It's got a timing belt that connects the 3 screws together, single motor, and the board is not like any that we've seen before with the Elegoo printers. It's kind of sparse. There's not really a lot of additional pins and what have you. I'm going to zoom in on this in a second, but it's using a small 24 volt power supply, maximum 2 amp input and 4 amp output, 24 volt. The reason why it's using such a small power supply though is because it's actually got an AC heated bed. So this controller here is the AC unit that drives the heat bed. I'm sure that there's some kind of safeties built into this. It can't just be a control mechanism to an AC mains, but you can see here it's taking in mains power and it's going right to this control. In, out, and then out goes to the bed. It's controlled by an input signal from here. So looking at the main board, I'm noticing a couple of interesting little things here. So it's got the capacitor pack right here for the auto power recovery. It's got a Realtek chip over here for Wi-Fi. It's got onboard drivers. It doesn't really have a lot of spare GPIO. There is a light port here, and I'm not sure if that's tied into pins, but I haven't been able to gain access to whatever underlying operating system this thing may have to even see if I can get access to those pins. There is a send and receive port here. It's labeled TX and RX. But aside from that and a couple of little pins down here, there's not really much to speak of on this board. This guy right here is an 8 gigabyte eMMC chip. I looked up the part number. I was able to find it. This guy right here is just a little push button. It's either a reset or some kind of mechanism for rebooting the board to do firmware flash or something like that. And then here appears to be the only CPU that I could see on this board. Compared to this G-Tech Spark board that I have here, this is a standard run-of-the-mill Marlin board. It's got the STM32 chip on it right here, and there's no other CPU to speak of, which is different than a standard run-of-the-mill high-speed printer, because typically you would have 2 CPUs and the eMMC chip would be storing the Linux system on it to run like a Clipper firmware or something like that. This only seems to have this one CPU, and that's not to say that there might be something on the back that I haven't noticed, but it's just not what I had expected to see. So I am quite intrigued to know what kind of system they're actually running on this thing. Could it be that they're running a modified version of Marlin? Are they running some kind of special dual-purpose chip here that has not only Clipper capability with a Linux system on the eMMC, but also has the ability to run this board as a motion controller? I'm not sure. So right now I'm taking the touchscreen apart so I can get to the back of the screen and see if there's anything that might stand out on the screen itself. Because maybe it's like a Soval SV07 where it's got the Linux system built into the actual touchscreen, but no. So here we've got very rudimentary touchscreen. I don't think this is a TJC branded screen, so I'm not exactly sure what is going on. The other assumption that I've come to think about is that possibly this is running a modified version of the Prusa operating system, because they are still working with what would be a Marlin system, but they have the capability of running an ADXL accelerometer and some other things that the standard Marlin setup does not allow. And I'm not sure if they've done any pushes to the official Marlin firmware, or if they're just running their own proprietary version at this point. But I do know that the latest iterations of Prusa Slicer do have, it's supposedly a modified version of Marlin. So I'm quite curious as to what could be running in the background on this thing. It doesn't really seem to have much for I/O for any kind of peripheral device. The only thing I could think is that maybe this guy here is some kind of serial interface for what would be a multi-material system or something like that. Not 100% sure. So my takeaways are that the Elegoo Centauri Carbon is a solid-built Core XY 3D printer that is designed to be a plug-and-play machine. I'm not sure of the pricing just yet, so I can't say if it's a budget-friendly alternative to other brands or not, but hopefully that all gets announced in the next few days. The setup was very simple. Just remove it from the box, place the lid on top, attach the screen, remove the packing foam and the 3 bedlock screws, and you're ready to go after the tuning procedure is finished. I'm not really digging the fact that Elegoo Slicer is just a copy of Orca Slicer with the Elegoo network protocol inside of it, and I hope that with the recent backlash Bambu has received with trying to lock down their ecosystem, that Elegoo and Orca come to an agreement and just have the necessary settings and profiles built in there so we can take advantage of the more frequent software updates that the community would bring versus having to wait for Elegoo's update cycle. There are no pressure advance settings available in the firmware, so you'll have to tweak any pressure advance you would want in the slicer settings, which to some isn't a big deal, but I like to be able to run the pressure advance test that Clipper offers to dial in my machines, so hopefully that's added in the future. I haven't tried the various speed settings such as ludicrous mode just yet, but keep an eye out for some YouTube shorts about that to see if it makes that big of a difference. As mentioned earlier, the camera settings need a little work as of right now, and I noticed that sometimes it would sort of blink in and out on the web interface, so hopefully that all gets rectified before the official release. There isn't a lot of expansion available on the motherboard, and I'm not sure of what firmware is running on the board to be able to utilize any of the extra pins even if I could. It's not an open source firmware as of yet, but time will tell if that changes. All in all, I find the Centauri Carbon to be a great 3D printer for someone just starting out that wants a production-grade 3D printer without all of the hassle of tweaking and tuning. But if that's what you're into, it may not be the best avenue to go down as the locked-out firmware will not allow for much flexibility. So that'll about wrap it up for this video. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up. If you enjoy the content and haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. And if you know somebody who'd be interested in this type of stuff, share it with a friend because sharing is caring. Check out my affiliate links in the description down below at no additional cost to you. Just puts a little bit of catnip into my kitty and it helps with my future channel endeavors. Once again, I'd like to thank Elegoo for sending me the Centauri Carbon for this pre-release video. From what I've seen, it is a great printer, and I'm excited to really put it through its paces and share my experience with everyone. If you got 10 seconds to kill, check out my website at www.theferalengineer.com. It's just a whole bunch more of the same stuff, but it justifies the $12 a year I spend on the URL. And once again, thank you to all of my Catnip contributors, both past, present, and future. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon. So the initial setup on this, I should back it a little bit so you see my hands. Huzzah. So looking at the main board, there's not really a ton that I can get from it. This guy here is a Realtek chip. I'm assuming that that is the Wi-Fi chip that is. So once it goes through all of the setups,